It's a pleasure to have Jeffrey Rosen, who's the head muckety-muck at a very, very important place, the president and CEO of our National Constitution Center in Philadelphia. I used to hang around Arch Street, Jeffrey, and Independence Hall and walk around there. They moved the Liberty Bell, of course, but that's over there, and see where Franklin and his wife are buried. I just used to roam around there, and it's a pleasure to have you. How are you?
That's so great. It's an honor to be on your show, Mark, and I'm so glad you hung out in Philly. Was the Constitution Center open when you were there, and have you visited us yet?
No, I haven't been there.
You got to come. It's the most inspiring place. It's overlooking Independence Hall with the greatest view of Independence Hall in America. Statues of the framers. It's called Signers Hall, so you can see how tall they were and what they looked like. Rare copies of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Reconstruction Amendments. It's the most inspiring place for the Constitution you could imagine, and I would love you to visit. It would be
you got a date. I've got to come there. I've got to come. Now, let's talk about your book, The Pursuit of Liberty. This is a tour de force. I'm telling you, I read a lot. This is really well done. How long did it take you to write this book?
Thank you so much for saying that. I'm so glad you like it. It took about a year of reading and a year of writing.
Mm-hmm. It's not so easy to write something like this. You got to think it through, and, everything doesn't fit nicely in a box. Sometimes one of these founders kind of slipped into one box and into another box, or they changed a little bit over time, or depending on the issue, right?
That's exactly right. And I did just what you did in your great book on power, which I really admire as well. And that's go back to the primary sources and just see what they said and try to distill their basic ideas. And it's so exciting to study American history because all of our constitutional and political clashes ever since go back to the founding. It's really important to understand the ideals that define us.
The book is The Pursuit of Liberty. Go to Amazon.com. It is fresh off the printing press. How Hamilton versus Jefferson ignited the lasting battle over power in America. So let's get into this. It was kind of Hamilton and maybe Marshall, I would say, many others too. And then you had Jefferson and Madison pretty much on the other side. What are we really talking about here in terms of the two big philosophies here?
So the big clash between Hamilton and Jefferson is first over national power versus states' rights, and second over liberal versus strict construction of the Constitution, and third over democracy versus rule by elites. And they fought over the Bank of the United States, taking opposite positions, with Hamilton defending broad construction and the consolidation of national power, and Jefferson favoring strict construction and the separation of power to the local level. Washington and John Marshall side with Hamilton, and ever since, our political parties and our justices have been fighting over the same questions.
Mm-hmm. And yet there were acts that Hamilton took, including is one of the main, if not the main, contributor to the Federalist Papers, where he made a very, very strong case to the states. Some of the states were very nervous about what was going on, and he made a very strong argument. Don't be nervous. You're gonna possess all this power and so forth and so on. We're very explicit about what powers belong where. Am I right about that?
You're absolutely right. In defending the Constitution against Jeffersonian fears that it would consolidate too much power, Hamilton said exactly that. Don't worry. It's a government of limited powers, and it won't favor total consolidation. Like you, I'm a big fan of James Madison as a force who moderates between the extremes of Hamilton and Jefferson. Mm-hmm. And in the Federalist Papers, both Hamilton and Madison were taking a position of dual sovereignty. Remember, Hamilton says the nation is totally sovereign. Jefferson says the states. Madison says it's dual sovereignty. And in the end, I think Madison was right.
And, not to jump too far ahead, but this famous letter by Everett, I think it was, and Madison responding, Madison opposed nullification. He was worried that there would be a civil war. And he explains in this letter, Jeffrey, and you know this letter, explains in this letter that the citizens of a state are also the citizens of the United States, and a state can't take that citizenship away, right?
Yes, isn't that an incredibly significant letter? And this
Brilliant.
is a time when lots of folks are invoking Jefferson to defend secession and nullification, which he had defended in opposing the Alien and Sedition Acts. But Madison, who also believes in states' rights, thinks of this idea of dual sovereignty. It's a complicated idea that you can be both a citizen of a state and of a nation, but Madison says the states are sovereign for some purposes, the Union for others, because ultimately we, the people, parcel out different sovereignty to different bodies.
So who basically wins the day early on? Who wins George Washington's view on the first bank and so forth? Because they were pretty hot and heavy back and forth.
They sure were. In the initial round, Hamilton wins big. He wins everything because Washington always sides with Hamilton over Jefferson. And then after Hamilton dies in the duel, John Marshall views himself as Hamilton's successor, and he basically writes Hamilton's views into the U.S. reports and into history. And in both Marbury versus Madison and McCulloch versus Maryland, Marshall literally has Hamilton's drafts by his side because he's writing Washington's biography at the time, and he finds Hamilton's words. And one of the most famous sentences in all of constitutional history, let the end be legitimate and any means that are appropriate can be is Marshall's paraphrase of Hamilton.
We got hiccups there. We want you to get back to the most famous sentence. Say that again.
I hope I got it right. But it's basically, let the end be legitimate, then any means that are conducive to the end are consistent with the Constitution. What he's saying there is you don't have to have a power spelled out like Congress's power to charter a bank, as long as chartering a bank might be useful to raising taxes or promoting the general welfare, then it's okay. And that basic idea is at the center of all the biggest constitutional controversies ever since. Think about that. The Dred Scott decision, the Reconstruction Amendments, the New Deal, which you write about in your book, and all the way up to the Affordable Care Act. What the justices are arguing about is liberal versus strict construction, with some taking the Hamiltonian view and others taking the Jeffersonian view.
It's a great book, folks, The Pursuit of Liberty, how Hamilton versus Jefferson ignited the lasting battle over power in America. Get it at Amazon.com right now. It'll show up at your doorstep tomorrow. I strongly encourage you to get this. So whose view is most prevailing? I mean, the book makes it quite clear. I mean, history makes it quite clear, but, you know, the audience isn't necessarily studying every footnote here. So there's back and forth, but fundamentally the trajectory's been in what direction, would you say?
Well, the trajectory has certainly been in favor of consolidation and centralization, as you argue very clearly in your book on power. There have always been backlashes, and when John Marshall is succeeded by Roger Taney, who tries to shrink the size of the federal government, and then the Reconstruction Court expands it, and then there's a fight over the New Deal, and they go back and forth. But broadly, the trend has been in favor of centralization.
And then what happens? In the 1980s, we're jumping ahead. We only have 2 segments. I definitely need to have you back. I'll tell you what, because I love this.
Great.
1980s, you get Ronald Reagan elected. He has an attorney general who I work for, Ed Meese. And they bring something to the fore that really hasn't been brought to the fore for decade after decade after decade. What do they do that kind of pushes back in a very significant way?
Well, they embrace the doctrine of originalism, or original public meaning. And they argue that the courts have made up rights and have enabled the expansion of the administrative state. And the originalist movement has a couple of goals. Certainly overturning Roe v. Wade is a famous one, but the biggest one for some was shrinking the administrative state. And they argued that the government had expanded beyond the separation of powers framework the framers intended, and appointed judges to shrink it.
We're going to take a short break. The book is, during the break, you can grab it, The Pursuit of Liberty, Amazon.com. This tremendous battle of viewpoints between Hamilton and Jefferson that is with us today. I'll be right back. We're coming upon the 250th birthday of the United States, and it has me thinking, what will America look like 250 years from now? My friends at the Heritage Foundation want to know what you think. What policies should America prioritize? What principles should carry us into the decades ahead? As America enters a new golden age, Heritage recognizes that this is the time to take stock and to be intentional about how we shape the future of America. And they can't do it without your input. So please go to heritage.org/LEVIN and let them know what you think is important. Without patriots like you stepping up and speaking up for what you believe in, America as we know it can't survive for another 250 years. Please go to heritage.org/Levin, heritage.org/LEVIN. Take the survey on America's future. This survey takes less than 10 minutes to complete, but it is critical for making sure that the America we pass on to future generations is an America we're proud of. Go to heritage.org/Levin today. That's heritage.org/LEVIN. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation. Great new book just out. It's right down your lane, ladies and gentlemen. The Pursuit of Liberty, how Hamilton versus Jefferson ignited the lasting battle over power in America. Written by Jeffrey Rosen. He's president and CEO. It's a big deal of the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia. Now, Jeffrey, I had no idea you were writing what you were writing. You had no idea I was writing what I was writing. And, you know, to be perfectly honest with everybody, I just touched on it in a chapter. You've written an entire book on this, which is very, very good. And I'll tell you, Chapter 8, to me, really does jump off the pages. It was a fascinating chapter. I mean, the book is, but Chapter 8, and you talk about Hamiltonian means to achieve Jeffersonian ends. And you kind of touched on this, too. But Theodore Roosevelt, very complex person. I mean, you know, he was a hawk, interventionist in foreign affairs, but he was very much a progressive. He very much believed in the expansive reading of the Constitution. And Woodrow Wilson and Calvin Coolidge. Sum up this chapter for everybody, because these people are very complex.
I'm so glad you picked that chapter, because that's the essence of the transformation of the Founders' Constitution into the Progressive Constitution, which you identify in your book so clearly. And that phrase, deploying Hamiltonian means for Jeffersonian ends, comes from a progressive historian by Herbert Crowley, who called on Theodore Roosevelt to deploy the Hamiltonian means of strong federal power for the Jeffersonian ends of expanding democracy and curbing the corporations. So remember, Jefferson had been for limited government, but Roosevelt says he wants an expansive government, but for the purpose of trust busting. And Roosevelt quotes that language directly when he announces the new nationalism. He says, I'm a Hamiltonian on federal power, but a Jeffersonian on democracy. And he goes on to stake his entire presidential campaign on that idea. Then Wilson joins Roosevelt in the election of 1912 in calling the president a steward of the people who should directly channel popular will, which the founders never anticipated. And Wilson, as you say very well in your book, criticizes the Declaration of Independence, wants to throw out the separation of powers and have a British system where the president rules in Congress without limits. And William Howard Taft is the great constitutionalist, and he's defending the Constitution against these populist demagogues, in his view. So that's the big shift. And ever since then, both Republicans and Democrats have kind of embraced the idea of using federal power to achieve their ends. FDR wildly extended Gall to reinvent Jefferson as the prophet of democracy rather than limited government, and he puts Jefferson on the nickel and builds the Jeffersonian Memorial. Jefferson would have been appalled at the New Deal, but FDR claims him because he emphasizes the democratic rather than the limited government Jefferson. And then just to take this story up to the present, Ronald Reagan said that he left the Democratic Party in 1960 because it had abandoned the principles of Thomas Jefferson, and he goes on to reinvent the Republicans as the Jeffersonian party of limited government rather than democracy and trust busting. So you just see all the sides shifting, but I call them golden and silver threads woven throughout American history. You can just follow the competing ideas of Jefferson and Hamilton as they cross. Sometimes they pull apart, but they're the essential markers of the debate. People always have to invoke them. In the end, it's the productive tension between their ideas that has sustained the American experiment over time.
And where are we today? Who are the Jeffersonians today other than me?
You exactly. And well, that's why the book is so great, because you're being principled about this. You know, we do not, obviously, to state it mildly, in our political parties have consistent Jeffersonians or Hamiltonians. President Trump is trying to shrink the size of the administrative state, but he's deploying strong executive power to do that in ways that certainly would have made Jefferson uneasy. And the Democrats, claim to embrace, well, Hamilton is the rap star of the moment and strong federal power, but all of a sudden, Gavin Newsom has become a belated convert to states' rights. So, we see this throughout American history where the sides are shifting to achieve their partisan ends. And that's why it's so important to be principled. And I know your listeners are, because they love the Constitution, to think, what principles do I embrace? And am I willing to go there whether I like the political results or not? And that's what the Constitution's for.
And politicians, let me put it to you this way. They can be principled, but they like to pursue power, don't they? And so
exactly.
Some of them, I think, or maybe too many of them, that's the goal. And it's not, that is, the goal is to pursue power so they can be a Jeffersonian one day and a Hamiltonian the next day, no?
That's exactly right. And as you say in your book, there's a antithesis between liberty and power. And especially for Jefferson, every expansion in power threatens liberty. Now, Hamilton sometimes thinks you can expand federal power to secure liberty, like through the bank or the defense system, but he may not have been attentive properly to the checks. And both of them were afraid of corrupt politicians and ultimately believed that it was the virtue of the people educating themselves about the Constitution that's going to preserve liberty and keep the republic.
Now, let me ask you about that. Your book seeks to do that. I seek to do a radio show, TV. Are we failing?
Yes, we are failing, regardless of your politics, which side you're on. We have to confess that, a lot of citizens are not reading the way the founders expected them to do, and they're not learning about the Constitution and debating constitutional principles and studying history, because the history is complicated. These threads are always crossing, and the people are switching sides. You got to take the time to really educate yourself, and it's so exciting to do it. I gather your listeners do like to read the primary sources and make up their own minds, but you got to take time, and you can't take dogma from one side or the other. You got to figure out what you think.
The book is The Pursuit of Liberty. You're going to love this book. Perfect for the holidays, too. How Hamilton versus Jefferson ignited the lasting battle over power in America. It's very, very important to understand. This book takes you step by step by step throughout American history. I agree. What we're lacking so badly is the study of American history. We have people telling us about the founding, pushing an ideological agenda. That is a bad mistake. You got to learn this stuff on your own. What Jeffrey does here is he's going to original sources. He's making the points. He's explaining what these men largely are doing, and it's absolutely fascinating. I want to encourage you to get it. You go to Amazon.com, any major bookstore. It's out right now, The Pursuit of Liberty, How Hamilton versus Jefferson Ignited the Lasting Battle Over Power in America. I'm going to tell you, I've enjoyed this. We're going to do it more often. It is a fantastic book, and I wish you all the best with it.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's an honor to talk to you. I so love the conversation and can't wait to continue it. Thank you.
Amen. God bless. I'm telling you, it's a great book. You folks are going to love this book, The Pursuit of Liberty. You go to Amazon.com and grab it. And here's the thing. Jeffrey Rosen writes his own books, too, just like I do. There's no ghostwriters. There's none of that. And if you want to go to original sources, he has them in the back of the book, in his notes sections, like you're supposed to do, because he's a very ethical writer. And I think that's very, very important. And as I said, when I was writing my book, I had no idea he was writing what he was writing. It's just, when you're an author, a serious author, you're writing a book, you're not even paying attention to what anybody else is doing. I don't even know what's coming out. It's just you're focused on what you do. So this book, The Pursuit of Liberty, is a great book. If you want to grab mine while you're on Amazon, on Power, you can do that too. But I'm here to talk about Jeffrey Rosen's book. It is really that good.